Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Ronika Merl, screenwriter and poet, activist and artist. She also directs and runs the Big Close Stories Film Festival. Welcome to the show, Ronika.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's very exciting to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Ronika. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to discuss right now. We'll be talking about art as healing, stories as power. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, let's understand and learn a bit about you, about your journey, your background, so that people know who exactly is Ronika Merl.
I am actually really, really happy to be speaking to an Indian person and to be going out live in India because I am half Indian. So I was born in India. I was born in Dharamsala in Himachal. But I haven't been home in so long. The last time I was in India was when I was 17. But my dad is Indian. My family still lives there. So it's coming home. I almost feel like I'm coming home. So that's really, really good. But yeah, so I'm half Indian. I grew up there until I was 6 years old, and then we left, and then I lived in Austria for a very long time. And then when I was 20, I moved to Ireland. And about maybe 5 years ago, I started on my screenwriting career. So it's been a bit of an adventure. I've traveled a lot, I've seen a lot, I've experienced a lot. Um, so I think that informs my art, and I think that having seen a lot and traveled a lot makes me a better artist. And I think that's something that I always talk about anyway. Is that if you haven't lived, you can't be as fulfilling in your art as you should be.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, tell us about, you talked about coming home. So, what it stories as power, when we talk about, do they
Mm.
take you home? Do they take you far away? What about art? Do they take you home? Do they take you far away? Many people keep on, searching for that thing
Mhm.
called home, and they
Mm.
drift and drift and drift. I
Yeah.
don't know. How do you find that healing? How do you find that home for yourself when you are in this difficult
Yeah.
times that we are in?
I think it can do both. And I think it's very important that it does both. I think art has the power to transport us to a faraway place. Um, I always call it my North Star. I always call it my absolute kind of the thing I look to, the thing I come back to is always art. So if I use an anecdote sometimes, if you put me at the bottom of a cave with nothing to do, I would be drawing on the walls or writing on the walls with a rock. It's the most fundamental human thing. I think the first thing we do when we can't even talk yet is we draw little pictures in the sand or in the mud. When we're playing as children, we make up stories in our heads. There's the prince and the princess, and or the knight and the or the football player or whatever. It's the first thing we do. It's so quintessentially human. So in many ways, when you have a little bit of art in your life, and that can be as mundane as sitting down in the evening after a long day's work and watching, a movie. You're already allowing stories into your life. Um, so in many ways, um, it, it's the most human thing that we do. So for me, making art isn't really, you can't really take it out of the humanity of me. So if you took art away from humanity, I don't think we'd be humanity anymore. We would, I don't know what we'd be, but we wouldn't be human. So in many ways it's both. In many ways it's a combination of the two. It takes you away from the tragedy of life, but it brings you home to yourself, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how did What's the role of art in your transformative journey, in your healing journey? Help
Mhm.
us understand that part, so that people can relate it with you, relate it with themselves too.
Um, I don't think I would have been able to heal at all if it weren't for art. I don't think I would have been able to cope at all with life, if I didn't have that north star, that thing that I was trying to get to, that shining light at the end of the very, very, very dark tunnel. Um, I don't think I would be alive, quite frankly. So when we think about art, we don't just mean, painting a painting, or sitting down to write a story. It can be much, much smaller than that. It can be a moment where you hum a little melody, or where you listen to music and it makes you feel something all of a sudden. I don't think people misunderstand. I think sometimes, um, oh, in order to be an artist, you have to make a living from your art, or you have to be this really, really successful, super, super famous artist, or if you're a musician, you have to fill out stadiums. No, I don't think so. I don't think you need to be profitable with your art. I mean, it's nice. It's nice to make money. You should always make money, but um it can be a lot smaller than that. And that's how I came through. Is I'm not I, Painting is the best example. I'm not a painter. I don't want to be a painter. I I'm never going to sell a painting. But I love to paint because it grounds me, and it's like meditation. It brings, like we said before, it brings me home. It gives me a moment of calm. I'm not very good at it, but that's not the point. If you want to sit down and experience life in the very, very smallest ways that you can, which is a very, very healing thing, to create art, poetry, music, painting, dance, whatever it is. And you don't have to be good at it. You don't even have to let anybody ever see it. Just for yourself, just with yourself. To exist in a space just within your own skin, within your own body, is so healing, because it doesn't depend on anybody else's opinion. It doesn't depend on whether you are going to be profitable, whether you're even going to be good at it. It just depends on you being a human being. And that's the healing power. That is exactly the healing power. So if you've never done anything artistic in your life, but you feel a little bit, you feel like you're stressed, and you feel like you can't cope, and you feel like meditation isn't the right thing for you because you can't focus on it, sit down, take a pencil, and just doodle something, and focus on that for 10 minutes, and watch your senses calm down, and watch your breathing get slower and get better. Or lock yourself into a room and just dance. And it doesn't matter how crazy it looks, it doesn't matter how stupid you feel. Just dance like you did when you were a toddler. You know, um that's the healing thing. That's the thing that got me out when I was in my worst moments. I sat down and I wrote stories about people who came through those really, really bad moments and who survived. And those were the stories I told myself every time I was in a bad situation. I told myself a story about a person who survived, and then I believed that I could. So that's, I think, what really brought me through.
Right, right. So tell us a bit more about your art, stories, poetry, about your activism, about
Mm.
being your artist, so that people understand. You also have this Wicklow Stories Film Festival, so that
Mhm.
people understand so many aspects of who you are, Ronika.
Yeah. I guess my activism journey, and it kind of goes hand in hand with everything I do. I think everything I do is very much based in the work, in my activist work. So that started in 2020. I had just come out of a really dangerous situation, and I had to live in a women's refuge for a while during 2020, which is not great. Like that's not not where you want to go. If you have to go there, don't go there during a pandemic. Um, but that was kind of where it started, and I worked with these amazing women who had come through the same service, and I helped them again through art. Um, so the first thing I did when I was in that refuge, I instituted a little crochet circle. So we would sit there and we would just crochet, because I know that working on something with your hands and doing something physically can be very healing. So that was the first thing I did, and then it kind of led from there, where we painted together, and where we started kind of, yeah, working through the trauma and through the trouble through art. And then I was commissioned to paint a mural on the wall of that house that I had lived in. So I continued working with that organization. I continued working with the women that came out of it, and encouraged them to kind of follow their dreams, I suppose, and be able. And then I worked with some other organizations, with survivors of sexual violence. Um, so to so that's kind of my activism side of things. And the festival came out of a different kind of aspect of the same core principle, which is to say that everybody has the ability to create something. Everybody has the ability to be an artist. So the festival we started because a lot of filmmakers in Wicklow, which is a county here in Ireland, didn't really have the outlet. They didn't really have a way to showcase the short films that they were making. So we said, okay, well, we need to institute something. We need to create something to give them a platform to be able to showcase what they're doing, because it's really interesting. And every year we choose films that represent that same ethos of you know showcasing mental health and how we get through it, showcasing what community can do for you, showcasing really really special people within the community. So the core principle that I try to hold on to with everything I do is the understanding that everybody has the capability to be, not just to be an artist, but to express themselves and be extraordinary within their own little circumstances, even if and especially if those circumstances are really really dark and really really dangerous and really really difficult. Especially then, I think it's in those moments where we need the help that art can provide the most. Um, so that's kind of, yeah. So the core thing that I do is to encourage people to be creative and to allow themselves to have that confidence, because the most difficult thing we face when we've gone through severe trauma is allowing yourself to take up space. We When we are abused, what we want to do is to hide away. What we want to do is to pretend we don't exist, because if you don't exist, then you can't be hurt, right? um and to find the moment where you are allowed space again, where you're allowed to take up room, where you are allowed to make noise, um that's a very difficult step in that journey. That's a very very difficult moment. um so most of the work that I do with survivors or with people, like just one on one, is to give them that permission structure to say, okay, I'm allowed to exist. I'm allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to make noise. I'm allowed to, um, make room for myself. Um, so if I had to pinpoint the point where my activism kind of hooks into, it'd be that moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you talk about that moment and about uh, claiming your place in the room and everything, what about stories as power? How do you
Mm,
tell your stories best? What is the best medium, especially in today's time when a lot of
mm,
these mediums are pushing you to tell your stories in just a few seconds? Is that the best way? or is there any other better way than that?
It really depends. So I mean, obviously, we all want to be TikTok famous, but it it depends. So the best example is I work with an old lady. She's 86 years old, and she's blind, so she can't read anymore. But nobody in her life really tells her stories. They all talk about, the weather and how are your eyes and how are the dogs, and she doesn't really she's not ever stimulated. So I go to visit her a lot, and what we do together is we'll sit down by the fire and I will read her short stories. So I'll just sit there and read stories to her, right? So the incredible healing power of a Hemingway story about a guy in a cafe um, is able to transport this lady who is lonely and who doesn't really have mental stimulation from the rest of her life, is able to transport her to a completely different time, to a completely different space, is able to take her away and out of her aches and pains into a cafe in Paris, right? um so it doesn't really matter what format your story comes in. It doesn't really matter what you write, what you do, what you experience, even the stories you tell yourself. Like, a lot of us, not everybody, but a lot of people tell themselves bedtime stories before they go to sleep. So they have a little daydream just as they drift off to sleep. They'll tell themselves a little story. That's already enough. If that's the format that your stories come in, fine. Nobody else needs to know. Nobody else needs to experience that, So I don't really think that whether it's your favorite movie is a blockbuster hit and you're obsessed with, Fast and Furious 9 or whatever, or whether you're a deeply philosophical fan of highbrow literature, or whether you're really into Bluey, um or Paw Patrol. It it doesn't matter, as long as it gives you happiness, as long as it gives you a sense of belonging, as long as it gives you a sense of, oh, I'm at home here. I can understand this. I understand this language. I understand these characters. I understand these emotions. Um that's much more important, I feel. So when we see like little if it's a 30-second story, or a 30-second sketch, that's in your reels on Instagram, cool. If it makes you laugh, achieved. That's an achievement. It made you happy for 30 seconds. That's fine. um we're so quick to, like, the highbrow philosophical person might be so quick to dismiss um a romance novel, and on the other way, in the other way, somebody who's like more into quick little stories might say, oh, I could never sit there and read in War and Peace. um but it doesn't matter. It's such an individual kind of choice and taste. So when we find the niche that we're attracted to, art is not there to be analyzed. Art is not there to be judged. It is there to be enjoyed. It is there to be experienced. It is there to make you more human. So whatever it is that you do that makes you that little bit more human, that's what it is. That's what it has to be.
Absolutely. So that is what it has to be. And so let's talk about your book, She. It's
Yes.
out in the market.
It is out. It came out in April. It is my third poetry collection. It is my most I think my latest book, She, is my most personal book yet. It's available on Amazon worldwide. And it's a collection of stories. It's a collection of poetry, all about a year. I spent all of last year traveling. So I lived in Spain, I lived in the UK, I lived here in Ireland, I went to France. So I was traveling a lot. And that book is a culmination and a summary of a year abroad. um so anybody who wants to be transported into a different area might find it very nice to have on a shelf.
So it's all poetry in the book.
Yes, it's poetry and short stories.
Wonderful. So who is that book for? Is it for only people who are in that part of the world or anywhere in the world?
No, I think everybody who's ever felt the longing of everybody who's ever looked at a plane in the sky and felt like, oof, I'd like to be on that plane right now. um I think would enjoy the pieces that are in there, because that is exactly what I tried to encapsulate in that book. Is that feeling of looking at a plane in the sky and thinking, I wonder where that's going. I wish I was on there.
Right, right. There is much to learn about these things, about coming home, about poetry, about being artist, about
Yeah.
healing, about the power of stories. So for those people who would want to know more about you, learn from you, learn about your book, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
The best way to connect is just to get in touch with me. My website is ronikamerl.com, where you'll find my contact details. I am on Instagram as well, at Ronika Merl. I'm also on TikTok, at Ronika Merl, but I'm not very TikTok famous. So I think I have about 70 followers. So I'm not very active there. But please feel free to get in touch. I'm always happy to have a chat. I'm always happy to also help out if anybody is struggling with a story that they'd like to write. I do consult as well. So if you're struggling with getting your story out, I am more than happy to help you along.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special
Thank you so
edition of the
much.
KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.